first of all, I mean, passion needs to be there. That's without the question. Like without passion,
Mhm.
you can't be successful. I really think so. And then I think it's having a message, something that you want to communicate with people, and then being really good at communicating it in a way that people haven't seen before.
Well, welcome to the podcast today. Our special guest is my friend Friedemann Findeisen. And I probably didn't say that right because I don't speak German, Friedemann, but we met in Costa Rica almost 2 years ago now, I guess it's been. And
Yep.
we went on a musician retreat with a bunch of cool people. We had a blast down there, but I wanted to bring you back on the podcast because of anybody I've ever met in my career, you were the most with songwriting.
Handsome.
I just remember you taking a song and you analyzed it in a way deeper than I've ever seen it. It was almost like you just see your wheels turning, like, okay, that's what's happening here. And it was amazing to me. And we just had a lot of fun. And I actually took away a few things from that I've tried to just step back and, think a little bit deeper, more about what's actually happening in my songs, and thought it'd be fun to have you share with people. But I know you've got a bachelor in music degree, right? And so you've been a teacher for, I think, 8 or 9 years now, and
Yeah,
you've
since
got,
2015.
okay, perfect. And you've got a whole series. I know you've got a whole bunch of different courses, which we'll talk a little bit about, but welcome. I'm excited. You guys, people that are listening to this, you guys are in for a treat, because I hope you're going to be able to take several things away from advice that this guy is going to give us. So,
Oh, thanks so much, man. I really appreciate it. Love being here. And yeah, dude, Costa Rica was absolutely incredible. Definitely one of the highlights of my life, for sure. Like thinking back to that, it's always, yeah, good times, man, for sure.
well, but so you live in Germany though, right? So
I
that's
do.
home for you. And so you
Yeah.
had an extra long flight. I do remember you got in and you'd done like just some brutal flight to get over there. And we all felt bad for you as we were on this bus, and you just wanted to be at the hotel in a bed, I'm sure. And hey, we got
Oh,
another
yeah.
2 hour drive. Sorry.
I had been awake for 25 hours and yeah, I threw up so much on that bus. It was terrible because I landed thinking like, because I try to stay awake because of the jet lag. And then I arrived and thought like, oh, finally, I've done it. I'm done. I'm here. And then we drove for another, I don't know, hour or so, or maybe 2 hours. Yeah, that was hell. That was terrible.
But we made it through, and we made up for it after we got you there, and it was awesome, right? So
Yeah, totally.
let's kind of dive in. I like kind of rewinding back to the beginning a little bit with musicians, because the whole point of this podcast was I wanted to kind of do it for somebody who's maybe young, maybe they're a college student or in high school, or maybe they just are curious about is music even a viable career path? And there's so many different branches in music that I think, the normal, hey, I play piano and then become a piano teacher. That was kind of the world that I grew up in, I think, in music, or you can go teach in a school as a music teacher. But there's just so many paths that I don't think most people that are practicing piano and complaining to their mom about practicing ever even have it cross their mind. So let's rewind all the way back. So when you were younger, were you just super into music, or how did you end up getting to where you were at?
Oh yeah, it was. I mean, my mom made me play half an hour every day, guitar. I started when I was 5, and didn't really get into it for a while. Like I had to do jazz and stuff that I was really so into. And then when I was 15, I had my first band, and that's when it really like exploded for me because I found, like, honestly, like songwriting is what kept me alive in school because I was bullied a lot. I was because as most creative people, I was a bit different. For me, was the long hair and the odd name, so I was bullied a lot. And for me, songwriting was just the way out. It was a way to build confidence and to do something that I was really proud of. So yeah, I mean, for me, it was absolutely vital. Like, I really feel like I wouldn't have survived without making music. And getting the opportunity to have a band that I was writing for, and every week I managed could write songs at home and get it to practice and see what they sound like with actual players was it's an amazing experience that I hope everyone can still have at some point, because it's so useful to hear your songs in action.
Right. Well, and I think one of the challenges I see, and I don't really call it the traditional classical way they bring people up in music, is sheet music gets put in front of you, and you're told to play it. And if you really get a stickler teacher, I feel like a lot of them will say, well, it's got to do it, look at all the way that Beethoven wanted this played. And it takes a little bit of that creativity factor. It's almost like I felt like sometimes I didn't have permission to do the music the way I maybe felt it, versus what somebody else felt like when they wrote it down there. But is that?
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, classical musician and jazz pop musicians are very different kinds of people. Like, think about music completely differently, and you can see it down to the music theory, down to the way they hear music, down to the way they treat music, right? Because it's all based on classical music is really all about performing the piece as it was meant to be played and doing the best possible job at it, and it's really about perfectionism. Whereas popular music like jazz and pop and rock and all those kinds of things, it's really more about expression. It's about taking the thing and making it your own. So it's way more about the individual, whereas classical music is really just about the piece and performing it as it was meant to be played.
Well, and as I guess if you rewind the clock back 200 years or however many years, when the Bachs and the Beethovens, they played with, I have no doubt they played with emotion, but depending on their mood, I almost am certain that they would have played it different every time, depending on what they were feeling like. And sometimes, I think there's, not to discount classical players, but I do feel like there's maybe some of that emotional connection to the original songwriters gets lost sometimes when you think what they were writing. And
it's an interesting question, because I think like Mozart and composers like that, right? It was really like, because there was popular music back then as well, which was way more like, fun, so to say.
Right.
But like, if you look at Mozart, who wrote at court, right? It was really about the skill of writing. And I'm not so sure if it was actually so much about fun as it was just about, maybe it was, but it's a difficult question to answer. I really feel like the emotion only comes into music when we go into like romantic music and like late Bach or early Beethoven and things like that. That's when emotion really started to become a thing in music, I think.
Yeah, something I've always wondered. It'd be just so fun to be a fly on the wall with some of those older,
totally.
Just watch as like, okay, he wrote it this way, but that's not actually how he even played it.
Yeah. Totally. I mean, a lot of them weren't even being played on equal tempered pianos, so it was playing on different instruments that would sound terrible to us nowadays.
No, yeah. Well, so you kind of started writing, and so as you were in that band, take us kind of down the road a little bit more. How did you end up where you are today now?
Through a lot of twists and turns, but I ended up studying music. First jazz guitar, which I heard was the thing to study. If you can play jazz guitar, you can play anything. Although I was more of a rock guy always, like I've always been into grunge and heavy stuff. And so that wasn't really the thing for me. I did that for 2 years and then I kind of quit. It wasn't really for me. And also it wasn't really about creative playing. It was really more about like getting the scales down and really learning how to do the stuff. And I'm really happy I did it, because it taught me a lot of things that I otherwise never would have attempted to learn, like ear training and the music theory, and getting really quick at that, and getting the analytic mind for it. And then I went to the Netherlands to study media music, where I teach 1 day a week now as an ear training teacher and songwriting teacher. That's when really songwriting exploded for me. Like, that's when I really started to see like, oh, hey, I am good at something. Because when I studied jazz guitar, I kind of felt like, this is a really interesting thing that happens to a lot of young musicians because when I was in my small circle in my podunk town that I played guitar in when I was a teenager, I thought like, wow, I'm like the best guitarist I know. Like, I'm pretty amazing. I'm pretty awesome. And then you study music and you're like, oh, whoa, I'm like bottom of the barrel, barely. I wonder like how did I even get into this study? Like, you realize like, oh man, there's so many good players out there, and it puts things into perspective. So it was a real damper on my confidence. But then coming to the Netherlands and realizing like, oh, hey, but I'm actually really good at songwriting, at the whole creating music stuff. That's something I'm really actually good at. And that completely changed my experience. But how I ended up here, because what I do now is I'm a songwriting teacher, at the end of my studies, I wrote a book called The Addiction Formula. And then 2 years later, so it was first, when I first released it, in my first month, I sold 2 copies, which was disheartening because I really pushed it and tried all the marketing and all the stuff that you're supposed to do, and it really didn't do very well. And then 2 years later, I'd been building and working on holistic songwriting on this platform. And then I finally had my breakthrough. I had a YouTube video that I put out that I worked on for 2 months, and it got like several 10,000 views. And all of a sudden, my book became a bestseller. So now it's a bestseller, and the YouTube channel has 400,000 subscribers.
Wow.
I've done a Kickstarter in the meantime, which went really well, and some other stuff. So it's all taken off from there, so to say. That was really the beginning of my career. Was that YouTube series that I did.
And I think what's funny is a lot of musicians that are just playing don't even think about, how can I, it sounds, I have no doubt you probably intentionally thought about, okay, how can I monetize this or help sell this book? But most of the time, the musicians that are really good, half the time they don't even bother to write the songs down, I feel like. And a lot of that is just, one and done, lost to the world, because they don't take the effort to do that. So as I look back on my time and how I ended up starting to write music, I'd play stuff a lot of times at the piano, but it wasn't until I actually sat down and had the goal of writing the sheet music out so I could play it again and again that it kind of clicked for me. And then it was, I don't know what, from an addiction standpoint, I mean, somebody, if they didn't know we were talking about music, the addiction formula, that could be, you could go all kinds of different directions with that. But for me, I would say I've become addicted to being able to write down enough of my music that then I could share it with people, because I loved being able to come back and do it again and again and again. But then I even loved more and more hearing people, oh my gosh, I like that song. That was so great. And just being able to share it. It wasn't even necessarily the money thing that I think.
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, the best thing about music is just, I really feel like the process, that's my favorite thing. Like all the marketing, the business side of things, like that's, I wouldn't call it a necessary evil, because what I learned after a couple of years was that it's actually really creative as well, and it's totally a way to express yourself as well. And it's way more fun than it sounds if you're doing it well, right? Like so many things, if you're doing it badly, if you don't know what you're doing, it's not fun. But the second you really start taking control of it and realizing, like, oh, hey, I could do this, or I could do this, and there's so many options that I have, it's a way of expressing yourself in a way as well. But yeah, my favorite thing has always been making music and the writing of the songs. Like that's my favorite thing. I was in a couple of bands since then, but I quit a band a couple of years ago for the single reason that I loved the writing of the songs, but when it came to performing them live, it was like, oh yeah, I don't really enjoy this. This is not my thing. I don't like being on stages. I really love sitting in a room with people and writing songs together, or even writing them by myself. That's the thing I love most, is watching or hearing a song come together from nothing. And at the end of a 2-hour session, you have a song you can listen to. That's the coolest feeling in the world to me.
And so with your classes that you're teaching with songwriting, I mean, take me through a little bit of, I mean, what are the steps you feel like people need to take, and sometimes even probably overlook when it comes to writing songs?
Oh gosh, I mean, there's so much. I feel like a big thing people miss is dealing with process. And what I mean by that is, we just released a course called the 24-hour song, which is about how to streamline your process, write songs quicker, better, and so you enjoy the writing process more. And I think what so many beginning writers focus on is only skill. It's only like, how do I write better melodies? How do I write better chord progressions, grooves, production, sounds, blah, 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 lyrics, right? And that's all important. But that's all, in a sense, just prep work. It all prepares you for the actual session. But when you sit down to write, like, I think my students sometimes think this is part of the reason I created the course, to kind of dispel that myth, that I sit, in front of my DAW with a big dictionary of musical terms and just be like, what should I do here? Okay, let's look up this chord. What does this say? And it's a very theoretical thing. But when I write, it's super quick. I make decisions like super fast, because I have that theory so baked into my brain that I don't have to think about it anymore. I don't have to look it up anywhere. I don't have to look up how to write a woodwind section, or how to arrange a complicated 4-part harmony setting or whatever. That's all in here. And that's the best part about it, is it's flow. You learn the stuff, you practice the craft, so that when you sit down to write, you can just write, and it's pure flow from start to finish, and you can just go, go, go until it's finished.
Got it. So if you could rewind back the clock, back to when you were sitting in your college classes, or that, late teenager person of, if you could give yourself some advice, what advice would you have?
I mean, to me, myself personally, it would be, I mean, everyone has their weak spots, right? For me, those weak spots that I see now were sound design or music production, and lyrics. Like, being German, we don't have the same connection to the English language that you do, of course. So for me, I had to really like relearn that. And I mean, even meet a lot of native speakers who haven't yet learned that, I think, and who still think that lyrics are just a nice added bonus. It's like the cherry on top, but it doesn't do anything for the song, basically. And there's some truth to that, depending on the genre, depending on the song, but it's definitely more than a cherry on top. It could be so much more than just the cherry on top, is what I'm saying. So that was really big point for me. And on a larger scale, I would say it would be to trust myself. Like that was a big thing I had to learn. Is if you think it's good, it's good. You don't have to check in with anyone. You don't need to get the green light from music theory. Music theory is not there to give you any rules or things that you have to do. Music theory is giving names to everything you can do. Like, the deeper you get into music theory, the more you realize, like, oh yeah, I can do everything. It's just that music theory, like, the deeper you get into it, the more it allows you to do. The more you understand, the less rules there actually are, you realize. So just trusting yourself. If you hear something and you're like, oh, I think that's cool. If it's something that you don't hear that often, don't think like, oh, that's because it must be bad, but maybe it's just because this is something new and original, and maybe you should pursue that. And I'm not saying that anything can be good. You still have to work on it to make it great. And the hard work is figuring out how to distill it and to make it strong. But that's really the work, I think, as a songwriter, is to reiterate until it's great. Everything starts out or has to start out, I really believe that, as at a shit level. Everything has to be shit at the beginning in order for it to be great at the end. Mm-hmm. So you don't try to write something perfect right away. You write something that's bad, but is doing something that you haven't seen before, and then you iterate on it over and over again until it's perfect. That's how the process works.
I've seen a lot of, I'm just thinking of like times I've been in the recording studio. I'll go in as prepared as I can be. And sometimes you're just in there trying to be as most efficient as you can. But I think some of the most magical song moments, and just songs in general, as I look back at the studio time, is when I've recorded something in, but then I've been open to, as a composer, musician, saying, hey, what do you, is there anything you think I could do differently? Or did you feel like it's, made it to this point, but it, did it leave you just being like, oh, that was perfect? And I think when you take it out to people who are willing to give some good feedback, but then be able to have some thick skin and be able to self-critique yourself too. I see a lot of musicians where they think this is the way it is, and they only know so much. And I'm one of those that I don't know all of these crazy chords, and I have some music theory background, but when you get into all crazy ninja level chord iterations, that's just over my head. I play more, I like the sound of it, but couldn't tell you exactly what the chord, the 9 chord with the whatever flat, where it gets really crazy. So I don't know. I think being willing and open to getting feedback is something that I would give myself advice on. Ask for it sooner than when you're in the recording studio or when it's too late. So do you see that a lot with artists when they come into studio sessions? I mean, is there advice you have for people as they're going through those iterations that can help them get, is there questions you can ask that help with that?
I mean, what I do with artists when I produce them is just including myself, right? Because everyone likes to spend a lot of time on parts, and we love working on details before the song is finished. But what I do now is I have a concept I call freight train through. And it's really about like, get to the end of your song as quickly as you can. Really, like, kind of like get the sketch out, like sketch the section and then move on, right? Before you work it too much, finish the song. because what often happens is you finish the song and then you realize, oh, that section that I spent so much time on, it's not really that good, or it doesn't actually work. It doesn't make any sense with the rest of the song. And then you've wasted a lot of time on writing that section. Or you can't figure out how to finish your song, right? You can't figure out how, like, it's maybe the section you wrote is so big and so monumental, so epic, so early in your song that you can't figure out where to go from there. And so again, you've written yourself into a corner. Whereas if you already know where your song is going and you know, like, okay, that's going to be my finale, so I have to build down from there and go backwards towards the beginning, right? It just helps you so much to figure out like how you're going to go about writing your song. So it's really a matter of, I really like the concept. This is something Quincy Jones said. You start with pencil sketches, right? You kind of get out the rough outlines. Then you do a little bit of watercolor, which you can still move around really easily. And then you do the oil paint on top of it at the end. So that's where you fix it to the paper. And I think that's really smart. It's really in that watercolor stage of moving the paint around a lot. Like that's massive. It makes such a big difference to approach music with that mindset of none of it is set in stone. Like I can still change anything. Any of these ideas that I have are just rough first ideas, and let's figure out how it works together, and then slowly kind of build the quality up of all of those little elements until I'm sure everything is working. Working with fail saves, checking yourself every once in a while and saying, is this working? Is this fun? Does it work? Is it cohesive? Does it make sense? Does it tell a story? Am I enjoying what I'm hearing? And asking those questions over and over again, listening to the whole thing start to finish over and over again to get a sense for how it feels as a whole, instead of just playing a 4-bar loop over and over again until that's perfect and then not knowing what to do with the rest of your song.
Right. Gotcha. Interesting. What other advice? I guess if I was sitting in one of your songwriting classes, and we'll just use me as a piano example, I'm curious, what would you, if I've got a brand new song, what are some of the questions you'd ask if you were trying to help somebody like me to kind of evaluate a song and make it a little bit better?
So usually what I do is probably just listen to your song and then analyze what I think where your weak spots are, and then we just talk about that. That's usually how I go about things, because it's so hard to say. People don't know what their weak spots are. Everyone always wants to know how to write better hooks, but that's honestly rarely the problem. A lot of times I hear really great hooks. Like a lot of people are really able, especially producers, are really good at writing hooks, generally speaking. But what they're usually bad at is introducing those hooks. This is a common mistake or something I see that often doesn't quite work, is that they have a great hook like in their chorus, but their chorus doesn't come across as a chorus. When that chorus hits, it doesn't hit. It's just like, oh, and by the way, here's another section. That's what it feels like. And so the drama is missing in the song. It's not building up to that moment. There's no tension created towards that moment. No anticipation. There's never a moment where the listener goes, ooh, I can't wait for this to happen. I wonder what's going to happen. Or I can't wait for that chorus to hit again. It's just like, oh, okay. And here's the chorus again. Okay, here's another melody. It's more like, and here's something more, and here's something more, and here's something more, rather than, and because of this, now this is going to happen, right? That's what we want. We want that push we really want to feel like the song pulls you through. That's what I mean by the addiction formula. It's so addicting, so strong that once you turn it on, it's impossible to turn it off again, because the storytelling in it, that's really what we're using, is psychological triggers that are also used in storytelling. Is that the storytelling triggers are so strong that they pull you through from start to finish. So that's something I see quite often. That's a really important formula to learn, I think, is the addiction formula. I think it's really important to learn to listen to what the song tells you. I feel like what a lot of writers are, I hesitate saying doing wrong, but to me, it seems sometimes, I think this is a mistake, is when they wrote a song, say you wrote a song 2 weeks ago, right? We've all had this problem. You return to the song and you're like, oh, this is not really that good. Like I have to rewrite this, or I'll add some stuff to it. Or you have a song that you initially liked, and then you're like, oh, I have this new chord progression that I learned, or this new lyrical idea that I just had. I need to kind of cram that into this song now. And what you're doing is over time, you're mutating your song and it starts to get all these outgrowths and it's no longer recognizable as the original idea that you once had. And so it kind of kills the original song. And the thought I want to put out there for writers who are struggling with this, who are mutating their songs, who can't get to a finish line, who don't know when their song is finished, think about it like this. Instead of thinking of your songs as a diary that you keep writing into, that you need to update based on how you yourself have changed over the last 2 weeks. So you need to update your song to reflect your personal changes, right? That's what we want. Instead of looking at it like that, don't see it as a diary, see it as a diary entry. And it's your job to go back to that diary entry, reflect on what you were thinking the day you wrote that, and then to get that across as clearly and as powerfully as you possibly can. So it's about containing something that you felt back then. It's not about adding like your new perspective on it. And, we have that all the time. We wrote something that's actually really strong and that's a lot of tension. And then we come back to it like, well, I can't say that, that's embarrassing, or I don't think that anymore. Like I was so stupid back then. We do that all the time. But those are usually the strongest songs, is when you're willing to be a little naked and to say something that's a little that has a little bit of tension to it, that has a little bit of guts to it, right? Those are the most exciting songs. So it's the worst thing you could do would be to edit it back down to something that's really this boring, average kind of message. And so to kind of instead making it bigger, right? Saying like, oh, this is what I was thinking then. This is how I was feeling. I disagree with it now, but let's really work that out, because this is how I was feeling, and this is my authentic self from that day. So let's make that diary entry as strong as I possibly can.
Yeah. When people are doing these, I think what I'm hearing from you there is you talk about finding that story behind the music or how you felt. And I find a lot of artists aren't very good sometimes at sharing the stories behind their feelings or behind the songs. You mean Taylor Swift is a great example. She's got all these amazing songs. Everybody, she's like biggest pop star of all time, but most of her songs come from some story, and there's something behind it, I think, that she uses to connect people to her music. And I'm curious to, I've been to a lot of great concerts, but a lot of times the artists just want to sing the song and they perform it and it's great and it's fun and you dance around. But I almost feel like they could connect better with that audience if they just take, maybe a minute or 2 minutes, even just setting up the song and just having so it personalizes it. What's your thoughts there do you coach people to say, hey, you need to find, or you should write down the story behind that song before you just perform it? Or what do you find when it comes to those stories?
Not really, actually. And I actually think the idea of that songs need to tell a story is a little outdated.
Okay.
But I still so in the literal sense, because what I think a lot of people will misconstrue this when you say storytelling in songs is that a song should like have a beginning and then something happens and then there is an ending. Like The Killing of Georgie would be an example, or there's some songs that really literally tell a story. But when I use the term storytelling, it's really more in the sense of using psychological principles from storytelling, like anticipation, like gratification, like contrast, for example, to make your songs more engaging. That's really what I mean. And I think what you do live with those songs is something that I don't really teach. That's something I'm personally not very interested in, because I don't do a lot of live gigs. I agree with you. I love it when an artist tells me a little bit about their song. I don't like it when they do it for every song, but like
Right.
1 or 2 songs per concert, I think that's really cool. I really enjoy hearing where that song is coming from. But when I hear a song, I feel like a story, a literal story in the lyrical sense, can often get in the way of the song, because if I know the resolution of the story, what's the point in listening to it again? Almost. And second time, I already know what the punchline is. Do I need to listen to it again? I have some issues with that. It also forces me to really actively listen to the lyrics. And I happen to be, I like so many people, I just mostly listen to the music, and there's so many other things in the song that I'm so interested in, that I only catch bits and pieces of the lyrics anyways when I hear a song for the first time.
I'm almost the same way. Like I do not hear lyrics. And when I mean, if I really focus in, I can hear them, but I hear all the music that's happening behind it. You know, what's the
Yeah.
bass doing? What's the violin? What's the piano doing? And I just feel like for me, that's what I hear naturally. And I have to make effort to, you know, I'll hear the notes the singers are singing, but I have no idea if they're saying, you know, good or bad words or what the song's even about usually. So
And you're a native speaker, which is, yeah, it's crazy to me. But yeah,
no,
I totally
I
get
just hear
that.
the melodies. It's for me, it's
Yeah.
music is music, and yeah. So, and I find that there's not very many people that are weird like you and me, where we don't hear the words near as much as the music part. So,
Mm.
one of our last questions I've got. I love getting this input from different people who've been successful. I mean, you've got 400,000 subscribers on your YouTube channel, and you're helping a lot of musicians. What in your mind, what is a successful musician? I mean, that's a loaded topic,
Mm.
and it's been so fun to get the different takes from each person on what does successful musician mean to you.
To me, it means being able, like, first of all, I mean, passion needs to be there. That's without the question. Like, without passion,
Mhm.
you can't be successful. I really think so. And then I think it's having a message, something that you want to communicate with people, and then being really good at communicating it in a way that people haven't seen before.
Awesome, cool.
So for me, it's really about having something to say, and then also being good enough to actually say it, because that's also very, very hard to do well. It's, yeah, so it's, in a way, it's being a storyteller. And I think um successes that other people might see as, like, money or things like that, or fame like that. um I always think, I think this is Eben Pagan who said that, but personal success comes before public success. So I always focus on those. I'm always so much more interested in, like, how do you feel about this? How are you feeling about your music? Are you feeling it's a success? If you feel it's a success, then I think it has the potential to actually become an external success as well. But I don't think it's possible to write something, to make something that becomes popular, that people like, that people buy, if you don't yourself 100,000% believe in. If you don't think that it's the coolest thing you've ever heard, I don't think anyone else will.
That's great. Great advice. Well, last question for you. What's the best advice you feel like you've been given that comes to mind regarding a music career for you?
God. um,
And if you got
I
two,
mean,
we'll take two value bombs too.
okay. Um, a big one for me. So I have a very stressful life, meaning I'm not necessarily stressed, but I definitely have a lot of stuff on my plate at all times. Like, there's always a lot of things going on, like several projects at the same time that all need 100% attention. And that can be very, very challenging. And there are moments when I get overwhelmed. And for me, I think the biggest thing in recent years has been a quote that I read, I think in Mastery, I'm not sure, Robert Greene, I think it was, which is, you can't do everything, but you can do one thing and then another. And that's what I tell myself whenever I get overwhelmed. I read that to myself, and it instantly calms me down. You can't do everything, but you can do one thing and then another.
That's awesome. Very cool. Well, Friedemann, thank you for taking some time to just share with people. I know we were just out on your website looking. You've got some really great resources for people out there. We'll put those in the show notes. But where's the best place for people to go look you up and try and find you?
I think a good first touch point. So we have, like, my baby is Holistic Songwriting Academy. Like, that's our flagship course, which has everything that I've figured out over about writing music in the past. Well, I mean, I started doing this 8 years ago, but I've really researched music way longer than that. This is just when I started teaching. But it's a subscription, so I feel, as a first touch point, maybe that's not the ideal one. We have a course called the 24-hour song, which you can buy as a standalone course on our website. The 24-hour song is about how to write songs faster, better, and so you really actually enjoy the process. So this is what we talked about earlier, right? Like, so skill and process. Skill is basically what all of HSA is about teaching you how to write better lyrics or hooks or chords or groove or whatever, production. And this course, this is really about the other half of things that is almost never looked at, which is, yeah, that part. How do you actually not get crazy writing these songs? How do you find the time to write your songs? Like I'm a dad, right? We have a 2-year-old and we share him 50-50, or like, looking out over him. And it's can be very stressful, but I still manage to write songs. I'm writing a musical this week, for example, right? And that's one of the coolest things, right? I can write a musical in a week. That's an amazing feeling. Like that's or act 1 of a musical. So that's 7 songs, I think, this week.
Wow.
And I'm excited about that. And it's my favorite thing. And the songs don't suffer from that. I think the songs are actually better because I can write them fast. And that's, yeah. So that power, that's something I really like to give to people. I've given that. So it's just released, but I've actually been teaching that course for a couple of years now at different conservatories and universities. And it never fails to get a really strong reaction from people. And a lot of people just go like, of course, it's so obvious. Like it's so many of these things are actually really there. Once you realize like how easy it could be, you start thinking you're crazy for having done it any differently over the past couple of years. So yeah, I'm really excited about that. The 24-hour song is what I recommend as a first starting place.
Awesome. We'll if you're listening, we'll just put that right in the show notes so they've got a direct link. And Friedemann, we need to get together more often. I would love to have you criticize or help me do better with my music. That's one of those. Criticize is probably the wrong word. I don't know that translates how I'm meaning it. But
yeah, give feedback too, or
yeah, just give feedback. And I love getting feedback, and I know, with your talent, you are so good at doing that. So if anybody's looking for feedback, go research more about Friedemann's courses, his stuff, and I'm sure you have some level of coaching or teaching that you do even one-on-one on occasions too. So awesome. Thanks so much. Yeah,
as part of HSA, we have like 3 weekly Zoom calls basically, and one of those is just giving feedback.
Oh wow, yeah, though that's worth the money right there. So yeah, go check him out. Definitely one of the most talented people when it comes to this that I've ever met in my life. So thanks again for being on the show and taking time to share.
Thanks so much for the kind words, and thanks for having me. Really appreciate it. It was great. Cheers, everyone.